there, it's Aisling. This time in my Mutant Memories series, we are going to continue my complete rereading of Volume 1 of New Mutants. This video is about the New Mutants number 13, titled School Days. This issue is made by all the same people as the last issue, meaning the same artists, editors, and writers. It came out on November 22nd, 1983, and costed 60 cents. The cover doesn't really have a lot to do with the real plot, but I guess there is a scene kind of like this, so it isn't completely off topic. But let's get into it. The plot. The splash page shows us Amara nervously being presented to Professor Xavier in the X-Mansion. Danielle tells the professor Amara's full name, and the professor tells Danny thank you and welcomes Amara to his school for gifted youngsters and to the New Mutants. Amara says, "Your gracious welcome does me honor, sir. I shall endeavor to always be worthy of it. Your pardon, Professor, but are you also what I am, a mutant?" The professor tells her that he is indeed a mutant, so her father put him in charge of her education. He tells her to come walk with him so they can get to know each other better. The other mutants watch the two walk away, and Danny says it won't be easy for Amara to jump to the 20th century from the first. Sam says they will be there to help her if she needs it because they are her friends. Amara asks what a mutant is, and Professor tells her it's a human with extra abilities like her own, and then he says inside of her mind that he is a telepath. Amara asks him how he can project words into her mind, and he explains that he can both project his own thoughts and receive the thoughts of others. Out loud, Charles tells her, "This is your room." Minerva, Amara explains. She is so shocked because the room is exactly like her room back home, down to the smallest detail. The professor explains some of the things in the room were sent with Amara, and the other things he collected and recreated from a memory he took from her mind, and he thought the familiar surroundings would help her feel more comfortable. Amara is naturally like, WTF, and asks, "Professor, are none of my thoughts sacred?" Charles said that a Psi like himself values privacy and he will not pry into her thoughts. Okay, if you can see how far back in my head my eyes are rolling right now. Oh my gosh. Charles, ugh. Professor leaves Amara alone, and she thinks to herself that Professor Xavier reminds her of her father, stern and proper, but she gets the feeling that he will never hurt her. She feels so at home that she wonders if her maid would come if she called to her. Amara then thinks about how her father's villa had a different view, though, and knows that it is half a world away, and they don't have electric lights in the villa, which she refers to as magic lamps. She realizes she has a lot to learn. She thinks to herself that the knowledge the others take for granted makes her look like a savage, and she feels the earth trembling underneath her. She prays to the Blessed Mother and asks if the shaking was her doing. And then she hopes to be able to control her feelings better because she has to banish and master her fear, otherwise things will get worse. Charles Xavier feels the shaking as well, and he says he felt the ground shake when there was a flash of panic from Amara's mind. He says he will be ready to use his powers to calm the girl, but thankfully it has not come to this. He says Amara's fear and the microquake are subsiding. Charles says that until he has established the parameters of her abilities better, he better keep a light rapport with her to monitor things and her emotional state. He says he must do this to keep her from causing a tectonic catastrophe. The scene switches to the patio of the X-Mansion, where the New Mutants and Stevie are in the middle of preparing for a cookout. Rain asks Stevie, who she calls Miss Hunter, if she can help in any way, and Stevie says that Rain can just call her Stevie. Stevie asks Danny, "How's Trix, chef?" Bobby in the background said he would rather call out for pizza or Chinese food. Danny points out that those who wanted to have a welcome cookout for Amara are the first to say they don't know how to cook to get out of work. She glances towards Bobby. Bobby says he can cook if she is willing to risk food poisoning. Danny tells him he is a bright lad and that he should learn. At that moment, Amara appears wearing a fancy and beautiful white Roman-style dress. Stevie Hunter says, "Wow," and then introduces herself and tells her that she will be teaching dance and helping Xavier with the team of junior mutants. Amara says, "May health, long life, and prosperity be yours, gentle lady," to Stevie. "Why, thank you," Stevie responds. She whispers to the others that Amara looks beautiful, but asks if the other kids had not explained it was more of a casual thing. Danny whispers back, "I said dinner. I never thought she would think it was so formal." Amara is embarrassed and wonders if the others think she is a snob for dressing this way. Bobby tells Amara that if there is fault, it is their own, not hers, and it was well worth it to see her looking so beautiful. Danny thinks to herself that Bobby is a silver-tongued devil, and that if given the chance, he would charm any woman alive. She admits that it seems to be working on Amara because Amara is now smiling. Then Danny wishes that Bobby would use his charm just once on her. Just then, Cannonball comes blasting towards the group with a box of soda. Amara says it sounds like thunder and exclaims, "Sam Guthrie," when she sees him. He says that he has the soda. Sam thinks to himself he has never seen anyone so beautiful as Amara. Then he does a loop to show off while saying, "Hey Amara, watch this." He lands the loop and says, "Pretty impressive, huh? For my next trick." Xavier is a little angry and telepathically shouts to Sam that he needs to quit showing off and he doesn't have the skill yet to do so. He warns him to pull up right away because he is looping too wide. But Sam doesn't pull up in time and crashes to the ground, breaking all the soda bottles. We are told that because Sam can't get hurt while blasting, he is okay. But we are shown that unfortunately the sodas all broke and sprayed all over Amara, leaving her soaking wet. Sam says, "Oh gee, Amara, I'm real sorry." Amara is very distraught and yells at Sam that the dress was her mother's, one of the few things Amara had of hers after she died, and that he has ruined it, and calls him a dolt. The mutants all rush towards Amara, who is running away crying. Danny tells her that there might be a way to clean and fix the dress just like new. She also explains Sam didn't mean to do it and that he is just a klutz. But Amara is already too upset, and the earth breaks open under Danny's feet. She begins to fall through the crack, but thankfully Bobby pulls her back and Danny says she's okay and instructs Bobby to get Amara before worse things happen. Lava begins to spurt up from the ground, and it hits an old tree and the tree catches on fire. Bobby says to let him deal with it, and he turns into his sunspot form and hauls the tree into a pond. We are told that Bobby is almost as small as Rain, but when he is in his sunspot form, he is able to easily toss the 100-year-old oak across the grounds. Rain shapeshifts into her full wolf form. Her link with Danny comes to life and she runs ahead, but because she is connected to Danny, Danny can easily follow her. Amara has not run far and is collapsed against a rock crying. Danny warns Rain that they shouldn't disturb her and that they can watch her, but she needs to work out her feelings on her own. Amara thinks to herself that she could have accidentally killed them all. She didn't want to, but she was too out of control. She kind of laments the same thing she has been wondering and worrying about the past few issues, and wonders if she will ever be able to live a normal life. Amara tells herself to calm down because now she has Xavier to help her, and he helps the other New Mutants. That's what Danny said, at least. And she thinks that he must be able to help her, because she could really easily hurt others, and she cannot allow herself to live if that is a risk. There is an interlude, and we are shown the headquarters of Secret Government Project Wide Awake. Henry Peter Gyrich, the director of the program, and Dr. Valerie Cooper, who is an aide to the Presidential National Security Advisor, Judge Richard Petrie? I don't really know how to say that. We'll just say Petrie. And they are both there along with billionaire industrialist Sebastian Shaw. We are told that Sebastian Shaw's company is the main contractor to create the latest model of mutant hunting robots known as the Sentinels. The irony of this is that Sebastian Shaw is a mutant himself and the leader of a secret organization called the Hellfire Club that is bent on controlling the world. There is a large sentinel sitting dormant in front of them all. Dr. Cooper tells Henry that the machine they are looking at is very impressive, to which Gyrich replies that looks can be deceiving and that they have still yet to build a sentinel that can really hold its own against a mutant. Gyrich initiates a test from the sentinel. Sebastian Shaw tells Gyrich that they can learn from their mistakes and eventually they will get it right. Dr. Cooper says eventually might be too late, but something is going on with the sentinel. Peter Gyrich explains what's going on and someone screams, "Malfunction! The machine is going wild," as the sentinel's hand and arm smash through a wall. A man sitting at a control terminal screams that rogue operators penetrated the computer control command system and took over the sentinel. Gyrich screams for the man to do something before the sentinel takes down the whole building. The man at the terminal screams they are trying to get control again, but the rogue has locked them out of their own system. All command programs are being bypassed and neutralized. Gyrich screams that this is impossible and to do whatever they need to do to interrupt the rogue in the system. even if it means shutting the whole system down. The man replies that it's no good, sir, because the system has switched to independent operation, and it will keep obeying the orders the rogue gave it. Gyrich panics and hits a button, explaining he has no choice other than to self-destruct the Sentinel. And with a push of the button, the Sentinel explodes. Gyrich is furious and screams, "This is more than a $5 million Sentinel down the drain. This is an attack on the U.S. government," he calls out. "I want the people responsible for this outrage. Trace the computer that accessed our network any way you can, no matter how long it takes. When I get my hands on those jokers, so help me, I'll make them wish that they had never been born." Shaw and Dr. Cooper just look on in the background. Far removed from the chaos at Project Wide Awake, we see X-Men Kitty Pryde and her friend Doug Ramsey sitting at two computers. Doug tells Kitty that whatever system they accessed tonight just went off with a bang. He explains that if they crashed it, then the operators are going to be really mad. Kitty asks Doug if they can be traced, to which Doug replies that he doesn't think so. They came in through a back door and caught them by surprise, but he doesn't think that this will happen again. He asks Kitty what they're looking for anyways. Kitty replies, "Curiosity mainly." She explains it was curiosity about a big shot tycoon named Sebastian Shaw and that kinky club he belongs to. Kitty thinks to herself that she wishes she could tell Doug the truth, and that Shaw is a mutant like herself and one of the X-Men's deadliest foes. Doug gets up and walks around Kitty saying, without sounding obvious, "Curiosity killed the cat," to which Kitty replies, "That's why we have 9 lives, silly." Doug says, "If you say so." Doug continues to explain, "This is very weird. A contact of mine on the hacker network gets us an entry code to Shaw Industries' computer system. From there, we make our way to the Hellfire Club. I think I deciphered Shaw's private executive code. But the first time we try it, we don't access the club or the corporation, but some sort of government system." Kitty wonders to herself if Shaw is somehow working for the government, and also if they know who he is or what he is, or if he is just playing them for suckers. Kitty doesn't say any of this out loud and just tells Doug that she is famished. Doug points out that that makes sense because they've been at this nonstop for hours. Kitty and Doug are walking down the stairs, and Doug says he cannot believe the improvements Kitty has made to this hardware. Kitty says, "I give him the voice, you make him sing." Then we see them in a kitchen, and Kitty is getting a bag of chips, and Kitty says, "Me stradivorous, you Itzhak Perlman." I don't know if I'm saying that right. I'll have to look that up. And Doug replies, "The team's supreme." They sit down to eat the chips and drink sodas, and Doug mentions Kitty's parents' divorce. Kitty says that things are weird and that everyone is upset and her parents are afraid of going back but also afraid of going forward, and they even are thinking about getting back together. Doug says it's lousy and notices that Kitty does seem to be handling it okay. Kitty begins to say that appearances are deceiving, but notices the time and tells Doug she has to leave. Doug asks if he will see her tomorrow, and Kitty says after dance class, and tells Doug to take care. Kitty phases through a wall of the Ramseys' house, and at that moment, Professor Xavier's thoughts are in Kitty's head, screaming at her to return to the X-Mansion immediately. Kitty assures him she is hurrying back and is glad that it is dark because she phased through the wall. She takes the back road and runs all the way back to the X-Mansion, I guess. I hope Doug doesn't live too far from the X-Mansion, but it doesn't seem like he does. Kitty thinks to herself as she runs that she shouldn't involve Doug in the X-Men's business, but admits she needs him because she doesn't have as much skill as he does with computers. Kitty comes across Amara in the woods on the way to the X-Mansion and sees that she is crying. Kitty introduces herself and asks if Amara is okay. Amara tells her she would prefer to be alone, and Kitty thinks that Amara must be about the same age as her. She thinks about how lonely and homesick she was when she first came to the X-Mansion, and thinks it must be even worse for Amara. How she knows it's worse for Amara, I don't really know. It seemed like Kitty didn't really know who she was, but I don't know. Maybe she just introduced herself because they had not met yet. Maybe she knew who Amara was, but just hadn't introduced herself yet. I don't know. Kitty asks, "Are you sure there's nothing that I can do?" To which Amara gets mad and turns to Kitty, half made of flame, and asks her if she is deaf and tells her that she just wants to be alone. Kitty says, "Hey, I'm sorry, no need to get hyper." Kitty walks away angrily and thinks that whenever she tries to talk to someone outside the X-Men or someone her own age, it never goes well. She says except for Doug. She and Doug mesh really well. Kitty is walking through the woods and wonders what the effect of her friendship with Doug will have on her relationship with Peter Rasputin. She says she loves Peter, but wonders what will happen if she starts to love Doug too. At that moment, she comes across the New Mutants in the woods, sans Amara. She asks them what they are doing there, and Bobby explains that they are looking after one of their own. He refers to her as Miss Pryde, which, yeah. So Kitty tells Bobby that if they are talking about Amara, it is obvious she can take care of herself. She refers to Bobby as Mr. DaCosta, intern. Kitty said, "You guys seem awful touchy." Danny asks her if she is surprised by this because Kitty has made no secret of her dislike of them, and Kitty even calls them ex-babies. Someone says it makes Kitty's solicitude ring a little hollow. Kitty says she can take a hint, and Danny says, "Do better than that, take a hike." At that moment, Xavier screams in her mind, "Catherine, I will brook no further delay. Report to my office." Rain tells Danny that the professor seemed very angry just then, and Bobby says that Kitty might be a pain, but he wouldn't trade places with her right now for anything in the world. Kitty is standing in the professor's office, and Xavier tells her she missed a training session, and it's not the first time she has missed one. He tells her even though she is an X-Men, they still don't know everything about her phasing powers, and they need to continue exploring it. Kitty explains she didn't miss the session on purpose, but she just kind of loses track of time when she and Doug are working on things. Xavier says that he is very pleased that Kitty has made a friend her own age and is using the full breadth of her intelligence, but explains to her that she is part of a team and the other X-Men depend on her being well trained with their own lives. He goes on to say that when she joined the X-Men, she agreed to certain responsibilities. He tells her she needs to decide if she is ready to honor those obligations, and tells her to also stop fighting with the New Mutants. He says they are hardly ex-babies, especially considering two of them are older than Kitty herself. Kitty asks if that is all. Xavier tells her she needs to remember how it was when she first found out she was a mutant, and that she should try and connect with the other New Mutants on this level, and it may help her come to terms with herself. Kitty phases through the office wall and says if Xavier needs anything, she will be in her room. Xavier in silhouette thinks that Kitty wants to be an X-Men so badly, but she doesn't understand why she is having second thoughts. He knows Kitty's roommate Illyana Rasputin is in their room right now with Kitty, and he hopes Kitty will be able to talk things out with her. He sends his mind out to Amara and wishes Amara had the same confidence as Kitty. He thinks that the night is getting cold, and after Amara passes out, he will have the other New Mutants take her to bed. Charles then remembers that he has to schedule a medical exam for Wolfsbane and Sunspot. Both were injected with a teratogenic drug by mobsters. So I looked up teratogenic drugs, but it seems to mostly normally refer to teratogens, which are things that affect a fetus when the mother is pregnant, like drugs, caffeine, diseases, that sort of thing. I think from what I have read, in this context, it means something that has some sort of like chromosomal or genetic effect. I've always been more of a physics girl and not a biology person, so maybe if you know a better definition for this, you can tell me in the comments. Charles says the chemical seems to have burned its way out of the two's system, but he still doesn't know if it will do anything to Sunspot and Wolfsbane. He thinks it would be easier if he knew what happened to Cloak and Dagger because of it, and could study that. He wonders if he and the X-Men should contact the duo, but then he thinks maybe he wants to leave them alone because the two refused Cannonball's invitation to join the New Mutants. All this happened in Marvel Team Up Annual number 6. Charles imagines his girlfriend Lilandra's face and wishes he could talk to her or even just feel her presence. Then Charles screams in pain. He thinks to himself that the scanning wave has returned again. He first felt this wave in X-Men number 178. He thinks that this scan is always painful and it seems to want to know something about this world. He decides to just keep it under wraps until he learns more about whether the scan is for good or for evil. He thinks he should probably focus all of his energy on figuring out the scan, but he would have no time for his students, and he thinks that he, like Kitty, has an obligation. The next morning, the New Mutants are working on lessons on computers. Danny asks the professor if he is okay because he doesn't look well. The professor explains he is okay but didn't get much sleep because of a headache. Sam says the computer is starting to give him a headache, and he admits he is struggling to understand the computer. Bobby says there's really nothing to it, Sam, in a cocky manner. Danny says that Bobby was raised on these monsters and that's why he's doing so well. Bobby says this is just one of his talents. Xavier says to Sam telepathically, "Cheer up." Sam says to him that he feels outclassed. Xavier says to him telepathically that he will guide him telepathically through the lesson. Amara is amazed and remarks on how if she pushes a square, a letter appears on the glass before her. She asks the professor to explain, and he says gladly. A little while later, Amara seems to be getting the hang of things and Rain is jealous that Amara is doing better than her, and she thinks that she really is as dumb as she is ugly. She calls Amara a heathen, savage, and Rain wonders if the only reason she's accepted at Xavier's is because she is a werewolf. Xavier is listening to her thoughts and wonders how Rain can think such things. He wonders how he can convince her these things aren't true. After their academic lessons are over, the New Mutants and Kitty head to Salem Center to Stevie's dance studio for a 2-hour dance lesson. Stevie tells Amara she's doing a really good job and asks if she has had training before. Amara says she did when she was very young. Rain tries to show off at that point and leaps into the air, turning from girl to half-wolf to full wolf, and asks if Amara can do this. Everyone is just kind of shocked. Sam yells at Rain because he tells her anyone could have seen her transform. Amara asks if they must always hide their powers, and Rain, who is human again, says aye. Kitty tells Sam to cool off and that everyone wants to show off from time to time. At that moment, Doug Ramsey pokes his head through the door into the classroom and says, "Heck, Pryde, you do that just by breathing." Kitty says, "Oh, brother." Kitty tells Rain that not too long ago that she got yelled at by Storm for the same kind of stunt, and some of them have to learn the hard way, but they all survive. Doug asks Kitty if she wants to get a soda at the mall, and Kitty says sure, and the two leave. Rain is embarrassed and tells the group that out of all of them, she should know better than any of them to keep her powers hidden. She talks about how her powers caused her to be hunted and nearly murdered by a group including her former guardian, Reverend Craig. She says she would have been dead if it wasn't for Moira McTaggart. Rain says you would think she wouldn't forget a lesson like this, but she did, and she apologizes to Stevie for her display of her powers. Later that day, Amara is stepping into the danger room, presumably for the first time. Stevie is in the control center and Professor X is down in the danger room with Amara. He welcomes her to the danger room. Stevie is thinking about how Rain and Kitty are very similar and they both are insecure and feel threatened by new arrivals and how they shouldn't be threatened. She says, "Monitor system set, Charles." Charles asks Amara how her uniform fits and Amara says, "Perfectly." He tells her that this is where she will hone her powers as Magma, Magma being her new codename. He explains that he named her Magma because of her powers and that this codename will protect her secret identity. He asks for a simple demonstration of her powers and that she needs to burn a hole through a steel structure that is now in front of them. Amara is nervous and says she's not sure if she can and that her powers have gone out of control before, and she's a little nervous to use them. Xavier says she shouldn't be afraid and he is monitoring the situation telepathically. Amara is upset and says, "You'll be inside my mind, but you said you would never do that." Xavier tries to explain it is for her own good and that he cannot teach her until he knows exactly what she can do. He tells her he must understand physically and mentally what's happening when she uses her powers, and that she even admitted herself she was worried about things getting out of hand. Then Amara said, "But I never imagined you would go inside my mind." She runs out crying. "Is this what your word is worth?" she asks. She continues to scream as she runs that she will not be lied to and she's no one's slave, and that she will not be made to do tricks or paraded about. She's a freeborn citizen of Nova Roma, and she will be treated as such. Charles calls after her, "Amara, wait, Amara." Later still, Amara is laying in her bed thinking about how Charles called out to her with his voice and in his mind for a long time, but she just didn't answer. She thinks about how he could have forced her to his side, but he didn't, so that makes him an honorable man. She thinks he has never been anything but kind to her and that she owes him some sort of kindness back. She puts on a robe and leaves her room. She wonders why she is so afraid and thinks part of it is the professor's powers make him seem like more than human to her. She thinks that the other part of the problem is herself because she doesn't know what she can do with her power. She thinks about how Charles could accidentally read into her soul and mind. She thinks about how before Rain knew she could speak English, Rain poured her heart out to Amara and said things she would never normally admit to anyone because she thought there was no way Amara could understand her. But she did understand her though, and she knows Rain has never forgiven her for this. Amara thinks about how alien she feels and that she likes the New Mutants, but she doesn't really fit in with them, just like they don't fit in her homeland of Nova Roma. She thinks, "Sorry, Father, I tried, but I just don't fit in." So now she is at the door of Professor Xavier's office or study or whatever. Amara notices the lights are still on. Amara wonders why the professor is up so late and then wonders if it's her fault that he's up. She makes fun of herself, thinking that it was dumb of her to assume that the professor's life revolved around her like the Earth does around the sun. She looks into the room and sees Professor speaking with a projection of his girlfriend, Lilandra. Lalandra tells Xavier that the reception is getting weak between the two of them, and this might be the last time they speak. Charles asks, "Until you return?" And Lalandra answers, "Fate's willing, yes," and then says, "How do I put into words what would be said so much better with a kiss or a caress?" Charles Xavier says that he now knows how Moira McTaggart felt when he left her to go off to war, and that when he returned to her, nothing was the same and they weren't in love anymore. Lalandra said this might happen to them too, and Charles says that she needs to come back so that they can find out. Lalandra says that she gives her word, and Charles says even from the gates of hell he will be waiting for her. Then he says, "Farewell, my love." Lalandra says, "Fare thee well, my heart," and the connection is lost. Amara is in the doorway and thinks that she should not have watched this exchange, and that she will go away before the professor notices. Professor Xavier psychically says to her, "What's done is done," and then in his physical voice he says, "Hiding or running away doesn't help or change anything." Xavier reaches out a hand to Amara and says, "I think we're long overdue for a chat." Amara asks who the woman was, and Charles said that she is Lalandra, the ruler of a vast empire across the cosmos. Amara asks why Lalandra left, and Xavier explains that her sister took over the throne, and Lalandra left to reclaim the throne if she can. Amara asks if he misses her, and he says yes. Amara asks why Charles did not go with Lalandra, and he says that he, like Lalandra, has the responsibilities that outweigh his personal desires. He tells Amara that every day more and more mutants like her appear, and somebody has to help teach them their powers, or they could cause harm to themselves and others. And Amara says, "The way I almost destroyed Bobby's city." Xavier says, "Yes. Is this a fear that you want to live with?" "I want to be home with my father and my own people, but my being here, it's the same thing, isn't it? As with you and Lalandra, it's duty," Amara says. Xavier tells her that accepting responsibility and obligation is part of growing up, and it's something everyone must face. Amara asks him if he's ever failed with a student. Xavier admits to her that he has, but it'll never stop him from trying. Amara says, "In that, you are much like my father." She tells him that she had come to see him to tell him that she was going home, but now she's decided that she wants to stay. She tells the professor she will do her best to learn and be worthy of his trust, and the two clasp hands. And that's the end of the issue. The next issue is called "Do You Believe in Magic?" Thoughts upon originally reading. When I first read this issue, I was probably like 10 or 11. I really enjoyed it, but I couldn't help but wonder why Amara was the central character several issues in a row. I love that we got to see a more casual side of mutant life after all the adventures in the past 6 issues. I remember thinking Amara was being kind of whiny, and she really just annoyed me. Remember, I've mentioned several times that I did not like her back then. I remember having a very different opinion of Charles Xavier than I do now, and I had very different feelings about how he acted in the issue than I do now. I thought back then that he seemed kind and wonderful to Amara the first few times I read the issue. And while I don't think he was cruel to her, my opinion changed this time around for reasons I'll discuss later. I really liked the scene with the cookout, and I remember thinking that Sam was an idiot for showing off like that, and even though I didn't like Amara, I did feel bad when her dress got all wet. I knew even back then that Amara didn't know about laundry machines, so she might have actually thought the dress was really ruined. I was a huge fan of the scene with the Sentinels and Kitty and Doug hacking into the system to make the Sentinel go rogue. The scene with Doug and Kitty working together was my favorite part of this comic. I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but just in case I have not, Illyana is my favorite character of all time, but my other top 2 characters are Kitty Pryde, aka Shadowcat, and Doug Ramsey, aka Cypher. So seeing the two of them together was very thrilling for a young Aisling. I have always been interested in computers, so the fact that they were both hacking was also super cool. When I was a teenager, I loved the idea of hacking or being a hacker. One of my goals was to become a hacker. Don't worry, this never happened, but I read a lot about it and consumed a lot of media and did end up doing some programming and stuff in high school. I might have mentioned this as well, but I also wrote a fanfic when I was 16 that grew into a novel that wasn't fanfic, and it was basically inspired by this exact scene of Kitty and Doug trying to hack into the Hellfire Club and Shaw's company. Yes, I'm serious. I loved the idea of the two of them working together so much. So this story grew, and I finished it when I was 18 years old. So I'm going to do a little self-promo here. I'm actually releasing the story through my Substack, a chapter a month right now. I thought it would be fun to release it because I'm never going to publish it or anything. It's not my best work because I wrote it when I was so young, but I think it's a fun read at least, even though the story grew from a combination of a New Mutants fanfic I wrote and a mix of another person's fanfic who I loved. When you read what the story is now, if you know where this story comes from, it's possible to recognize the fact that it is heavily inspired by the New Mutants and X-Men, as well as dark novels I used to love as a teen. So if you want to read it, I'll have a link in the description that'll lead to my link tree, and that has a link to my Substack. It's free to follow, and you'll get an update of this story every month. Sorry for the self-promotion. I try not to be too pushy about people following me on other accounts, but this is one instance where I think it kind of makes sense to mention another place where you can follow me. So yeah, reading this scene again was awesome, and I remembered so fondly what this scene meant to me, what it inspired in me as a kid and a teenager. I know it's super weird that I'm so fond of this scene, but I want to be honest about things I really liked, even if it's kind of embarrassing. So I remember feeling very torn whenever the New Mutants and Shadowcat fought. I was like, I love you all, please get along. I felt so sad for Rain since I didn't like Amara. I kind of shared in Rain's annoyance with her. I was sad that Rain was feeling so subpar next to Amara. I was angry as a kid because it just seemed like Amara was conventionally attractive and everybody liked her so much because of this. Which nowadays, yes, there is a little bit of that going on, but not to the degree that I originally thought in these comic books. I wanted Rain to somehow be better than Amara in some way, to triumph over her, because I liked Rain a lot more than Amara. I realize that's pretty mean and immature. There is room for everybody to be liked. I now hope for Rain and Amara to become friends, but honestly, I don't remember if they ever become close. I don't really think they are ever the best of friends. But from my memory, Amara is always kind of an outsider, even more into the series, and I do kind of feel sorry for Amara for that reason as well. I remember thinking that Rain being yelled at when she did the trick in the dance studio was a little too much when I originally read it, but now I guess Sam is right, like they don't want to expose their secret identities. I liked that this issue showed the New Mutants doing ballet. I thought Sam's horrible stance and awkwardly bent knee were so funny, especially because all of my young life from 3 onwards, I was a dancer. Being a ballerina myself, I thought it was great that Professor Xavier thought it was important for them all to learn ballet. It also made me feel closer to the characters as I had something in common with them. So, when I originally read this, I thought Amara was being ridiculous for not trusting Xavier around her thoughts. I thought she was being annoying and dramatic, and the whole scene in the danger room just drew more of my ire. I was so tired of Amara crying, Amara yelling, Amara running around, Amara being dramatic. So, I'll get into this later, but I have a very different opinion now. I did like that Amara trusted him at the end, and I thought Professor and Amara holding hands was very sweet. I think that's all I remember about this issue, so I probably don't have to say this, but the next issue, number 14, is one of my very favorite issues of New Mutants, so I'll have even more to say about that issue in the next video. Current thoughts. So I had a great time reading this, and if I'm honest, it's my favorite issue I've read so far in this read-through. First, I want to mention the cover. The cover is really cool, and I think dramatic and well illustrated, and is very striking, but it's not very accurate as a depiction as to what this issue is actually about. So this scene does kind of happen where the New Mutants tell Kitty off, but none of them are in uniform. Kitty never cries, and it's just far less dramatic than this cover may lead you to believe. I think they're kind of counting on Kitty Pryde's star power to sell this one, which kind of makes me remember that Kitty is featured a few times in future issues of New Mutants, which makes sense because she is around the same age as the New Mutants, or as she calls them, the X-Babies, and her best friend is later on the team. I think this is one of the crossovers, other than the New Mutants in general, that just makes sense, far more sense than Team America anyway. So yeah, the cover isn't really accurate, but I still like it, and it's a very memorable cover for me. So when Amara is introduced to Professor Xavier, this brings up one of the main things I really thought about this issue, and it's something I've mentioned a couple times in this series of rereadings. Professor X is lying about going into people's mind. I can understand him maybe talking to Amara in her mind that first time to demonstrate his powers in a way that she will understand, but he does it over and over and over again, even though he says he won't. I almost laughed out loud when in one panel Xavier is promising Amara that he will respect her privacy, but in the panel right before it he reveals that he read her mind to find out what her bedroom in Nova Roma looked like. Oh my god. So yeah, like, I get he was trying to help her feel at home, but this is a little creepy. Also, like, when did he read her mind to find out about her room? It must have been before she came for him to have time to perfectly replicate her room to every detail. Did he use Cerebro to read her mind from a far distance? If she had been at the X Mansion for a few days, where was she sleeping? Why didn't Xavier introduce himself right away? I know this is probably not something I should think about, but I think it's kind of a weird thing to have happen. Also, like, I know maybe he is not reading her every thought, but instead lightly monitoring her, but it seemed to me that Amara was not okay with him being in her mind at all. Although I understand Amara is dangerous, I think he should have been more honest with her in the beginning that he would be lightly in her mind. Maybe he thought it was too much to take in. Later on in the comics, she finds out that he has even this amount of connection with her mind, and Amara is definitely not okay with this, as we see by her screaming and literally running away from Xavier. The cookout scene was cute, and I enjoyed seeing the kids off duty. I really liked that Stevie was so involved with the New Mutants early on and was working with Charles to help them. I like Stevie. I wish she was still more active in the comics. She knew how to work the Danger Room, which I think is impressive. She was a very loyal ally to the X-Men and the New Mutants, despite just being a human. I also think she is a good counterpoint to Xavier in these comics. I guess in X-Men Gold, Stevie is a congresswoman, but we don't really see her too much nowadays in comics. I don't really know where she went. I think she is a kind person, and she has helped Xavier and the X-People many times. She kind of continues to be a presence in the New Mutants, but less and less as the series goes on, which is a shame. I kind of realized on this read-through that Danny seems to have a thing for Bobby in these earlier issues. For some reason, I really didn't remember that. I think maybe I knew it at one point, but I just forgot. I'm not really sure, really. But yeah, she definitely seems to have a thing for him. So I'm going to talk about Amara again now, and I will repeat what I've been saying in the past few videos. I'm much more sympathetic to her this time reading through the series. She's just a kid in a super weird situation with a very dangerous mutant power. What I mean is, for instance, yes, Rain is in danger because she is a werewolf, but she can't kill many people as quickly as Amara can. So it makes sense that Amara would have a lot of drama. But I really can't help but wonder if all this focus was on Amara because Marvel thought she would be really popular or something. I don't think Amara ever ended up being that popular, but let me know if she was your fave. I want to see her have fans. So I think Amara was also on edge already after having the problems she had in the last issue, which may have caused her to be more sensitive than normal, especially when Sam ruins her dress and Kitty asks if she wants help. I kind of already went over the scene with the Sentinels, but I'll say yes, I enjoyed it this time around too. I was so excited to see two of my favorites, Kitty and Doug, and now I'm getting even more excited for the upcoming issues. Yeah, excited. But also, Professor Xavier is being weird again. When he is yelling at Kitty telepathically, for some reason all the New Mutants can hear him too. At least I think they can. They all seem to know what's going on with Kitty. Bobby even says that he wouldn't trade places with Kitty for anything at the moment that Professor's yelling at her. Why is he broadcasting these thoughts? Can the X-Men hear this too if they are in the X-Mansion? Can Amara hear them? How terrifying. Plus, Xavier is pretty tough on Kitty. I think people sometimes forget how young Kitty was when she first joins the X-Men. Yes, she is very intelligent and all that, but she was 13 when she first joined, so she's like 13 or 14 years old in this scene, where Xavier is like screaming at her, "Come on, Professor, where are your kid gloves?" I understand that Professor is trying to hold her accountable, and a few issues before in X-Men, he tried to put her on the New Mutants, and she fought to stay on the X-Men, so yes, I can understand Professor being a little angry with her that she fought so hard to stay on the X-Men and then she wasn't showing up for training and wasn't doing what she was supposed to be doing, but again, she's like a kid. Also, the part where Kitty is thinking about how she loves Peter and wonders if she begins to love Doug just goes to show that she's just a teenager. I wonder if Kitty and Doug would have dated if Peter wasn't around. So I could go into a whole thing right now about how yucky I find the Shadowcat and Colossus situation. And that was another thing I didn't blink an eye at when I was younger reading this, was Colossus and Kitty's age difference. I have some feelings about that, but other people have talked about it quite a bit in other videos on this platform. But, maybe I'll do a separate video about it someday. So, about Rain and Bobby being injected by mobsters in Marvel Team Up Annual number 6, keep a pin in that. It will come back around. I couldn't find anywhere to read this issue that didn't make me feel like I was going to get digital scabies. Maybe one day I will buy it. All you need to know is that Sunspot and Wolfsbane were kidnapped by mobsters who injected them with drugs to try and replicate the way that Cloak and Dagger, another Marvel duo, came about. Spider-Man rescues them, and Cloak and Dagger are around. The drugs seemingly burn away because of Wolfsbane and Sunspot having mutant blood, but this will come up again. I still feel bad for Rain for feeling inadequate, and Sam being shit with computers. It's hard to be bad at things when others are excelling at them. The scene with Rain at the dance studio made me feel a lot of secondhand embarrassment, and once again, I feel bad for Rain. But also, what was she thinking? As she later states, she knows why they have to keep a low profile. I think, though, that it's natural within a group of teenagers, rivalries and jealousies would form along with friendships. So this makes a little bit of sense, Rain acting out like this. Plus, as I said about Kitty, Rain's super young, too. People do weird things when they're young. I really like the illustration of Rain when she is explaining that she knows she made a mistake. The art overall in this book was pretty good and exciting, except for every so often some weird inking that makes people look strange, like this image of Doug. Yikes. I'm gonna hope that Stevie measured Amara for that uniform and Charles didn't somehow psychically measure her. That sounds so creepy. In the Danger Room scene with Amara and Xavier, I think Amara had every right to be upset. It's like I've been trying to say this whole time. Xavier is lying. Xavier lies. He stretches the truth and misrepresents his powers and how he uses them constantly, and how often he uses them. He seems to be constantly monitoring all of the New Mutants in some way at all times. Earlier, he even reads Rain's thoughts about feeling dumb and ugly. He is not just monitoring her overall feelings. We see him hearing her exact words in his head. This is not subtle or small observation or impressions. He is flat out listening to people's thoughts. I don't know how the writers thought this was justified, unless they actually didn't and they were trying to show a darker side of Xavier. I know it seems like I'm making a big deal about this, but honestly, this feels very invasive, and he isn't honest about it. It makes me wonder how we can trust other things he says, which, as we know now, in 2023, he was lying about a lot of things. Amara gets upset, and I would too. Logically, what Xavier is saying and doing doesn't really add up. He should have been honest with Amara from the beginning that he would be monitoring her emotional state for safety reasons. I think Amara would have still been bothered and upset, but wouldn't have felt so betrayed. Then Amara kind of second-guesses herself and her reasons for Xavier probably being a good person. And her reason for Xavier probably being a good person is that he doesn't use his powers to force her to his side. Okay, yeah, that's true, but he lies all the time. He is not really trustworthy, and she doesn't really owe him any loyalty at this point. Yes, he is feeding, housing, and clothing her, but even then, he is using his powers to spy on her. It just feels a little yucky to me. She even admits to the power dynamic of him not feeling human because of his powers. I think she is actually pretty afraid, and honestly, Professor Xavier's powers are terrifying. I'm actually feeling lucky Xavier wasn't even worse than he actually was. I do like the ending where Xavier admits he has failed a student. At least there is that much modesty in him. I think truly that Charles is not the worst person in the X universe, not by far, but we can all admit that he's not the most moral either, right? To me, it hurts a little bit because as a kid, I thought Xavier was this amazing dude, and I was really rooting for him and his worldview. Rereading this as an adult makes me feel like he is more of a weird uncle rather than a father figure. I know he could have done worse, but still, he's not as benevolent as I think Marvel wanted us to believe he was. And I honestly don't know if that's by design or if it's just poor writing. But I think that's all my thoughts on this one. I will talk about the people that Kitty mentions. Final rating. I gave this one possibly the highest score I've given so far, a lofty 8 out of 10. I gave it 2 out of 3 points for art, 2.5 out of 3 for the story. It was good, but parts of it felt dated, and the Xavier logic was just not good. And 3 out of 3 points for character development, because that's pretty much the whole point of this issue is character development. And a 0.5 out of 1 for if it holds up. I took away half a point from how it holds up because of the Xavier stuff, but I still loved the story, so I didn't give it a 0. So that's it for this episode of Mutant Memories and my complete reread of The New Mutants, Volume 1. Did you like this issue as much as I did? Who are your favorite characters so far? Do you agree Xavier is kind of not the best? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Sorry again for the slow release of these videos. I had a 2-week nasty case of COVID. I got it for the first time. And the week before that, my favorite cat and my best friend for most of my life passed away. So it's been a rough couple of weeks. I'm hoping to have the next video up soon because I'm really excited about it. Like, so excited. I have a lot going on in my personal life right now, even beyond what I just mentioned. But I love this channel and I'm excited for future videos. If you liked this video, please let me know. And if you want, you can even subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And sometimes I make videos about other stuff too that's not New Mutants related. I have a few of those in the pipeline, but those ones always take a lot longer, so they come out a bit slower. If you have any ideas to improve these videos, please just let me know. Just keep it constructive. And at the time of recording this, it's finally autumn where I live, so the weather where I live is getting cooler, and I love that. Alrighty, have a good day or night. Be well. Aisling out.